Hi everybody, I wanted to do a quick video on negative versus positive feedback. While this is certainly an important concept in chapter 1, it definitely is sort of the overarching background concept that you're going to encounter in every chapter. Because certainly when we think about the perspective of life and being alive, everything has to do with these feedback loops. So the first thing we have to understand is homeostasis. What is homeostasis? I always like to think of homeostasis, if this is our pyramid of health, we can say that homeostasis will be living at the top of the pyramid. So here is your happy place. Homeostasis is the happy place. Homeostasis literally translates to same state. It means being in, like I said, in your happy place. So for any given physiological concept, any physiological process, there's always a happy place. There's always what's called a set point. That's where you want to be. The classic example would be body temperature, and we know that is 98.6. Of course, to be clear, not everyone's body temperature set point is 98.6, but that's on average. So you kind of always, especially from a healthcare perspective, you always want to figure out what is your patient's, what is that individual's set point. If you think about something like heart rate, the average heart rate, resting heart rate, is anywhere from 60 to 100 beats per minute. And so this is why you would want to take your heart rate multiple times over different times in the day, over different days, to see what is your average resting heart rate. So maybe your resting heart rate is 68, somebody else's is 72, somebody else's is 85, but just know that is your set point. That is your happy place. That's where your body wants to be. But of course, the environment doesn't really care about you. There's all sorts of things that are happening that are threatening homeostasis. And so if we think about this, let me do it so I can actually manipulate this, is that if here you are in your happy place, well, when things happen in the environment, they want to take you out of your happy place. So if you're already at the top of the pyramid, we're going to call that perfect health. So any environmental trigger is going to push you. You can't go higher up the pyramid. You can only get pushed down. So if you get pushed anywhere, you can get pushed down this way, and then you have a negative feedback process that brings you back up to the top. And then you may get pushed down this way, and then you have a negative feedback process that brings you back up to the top. So you can think of this kind of like the Goldilocks principle. There's only one happy place if you get pushed too far up or too far. So it's too far to the right or too far to the left. They are both equally as bad. So if you think about, say, the body temperature, if it's 98.6, there's an error both getting too hot and an error getting too cold. So negative feedback always puts you back into your happy place. Just to mention this already, is your book talks about negative versus positive feedback, just due to the quirk of the English language. Negative does not mean bad, and positive does not mean good. Negative means negate the stimulus. Positive means to enhance the stimulus. So we'll use some examples later for you to see this. But what I mean by negative feedback, and why I say that everything in your body operates by negative feedback, is because it opposes the stimulus. If you're in your happy place and the stimulus pushes you halfway down the left side, well, the negative feedback process is going to bring you back halfway up on the right side, that same amount back up. If the environmental stimulus pushes you down the right side, then your negative feedback process is going to bring you back that many spaces to the left. So let's just say that here you are at the top of the pyramid, the environmental stimulus knocks you down 2 steps. 1, 2. Well, the negative feedback process is going to bring you back up 2 steps. 1, 2. If the environmental process pushes you 3 steps to the right, 1, 2, 3, the negative feedback process is going to bring you back 3 steps to the left. 1, 2, 3, back into homeostasis. So this is a kind of theoretical ideal, because none of us are perfectly healthy, but as I said, everything is regulated by negative feedback. So if you think about somebody with diabetes, that is an error in regulating blood sugar. So you have insulin that helps you lower your blood sugar level, and you have the hormone glucagon that increases your blood sugar level because you want your blood sugar to be in that happy place. So hormones and chemicals and oxygen level and carbon dioxide level and body temperature and blood pressure and blood volume, all of these things are regulated by negative feedback processes. So let's look at an example here. So if we kind of think of this, here is the basic negative feedback process. So here you are, for whatever given physiological condition, you are in homeostasis. And then you're in homeostasis, some sort of stimulus happens, and that takes you out of homeostasis. And then in response to that, your body has a negative feedback process that negates the stimulus and puts you back in homeostasis. So let's look at an example here. So let's take body temperature. So here you are in homeostasis, 98.6 degrees. So that's where you want to be. But then you have some sort of stimulus happen. So it's cold weather. So the cold weather is now threatening homeostasis. It's pushing you out of your set point. It's pushing you down that pyramid away from where you want to be. So then, of course, you can see that as long as you're in that cold weather, your body temperature drops to 97.5 degrees. So now you are out of homeostasis. So, of course, then you have a negative feedback process called shivering. Your muscles shiver, they contract, they generate heat. That heat generation is going to counteract the loss of heat due to the cold weather. And so, of course, that then puts you back into homeostasis. So now we are matching your current condition, which was 97.5, is now 98.6, and that matches your set point. So that's kind of how this process works. So we are in homeostasis, the environmental condition threatens it, it takes you out of homeostasis, and the feedback mechanism brings you back to your set point, back into homeostasis. So let's look at another example here. So here we are, we're starting stimulus, starting at homeostasis, we're gonna have a stimulus, it's gonna take us out of homeostasis, and then we're gonna have a negative feedback process. So let's talk about blood loss. So here you are, if we're thinking about your blood vessels, obviously your set point would be not bleeding. That's where you want to be. That is your happy place. So here you are, the stimulus then is your skin and your blood vessel gets cut. So that is going to take you out of homeostasis. So now you are bleeding. So if we think about the environment has caused you to bleed, negative feedback is going to get you back to not bleeding. So just take a moment, think about that. What is the process of your body that stops the bleeding? Well, blood clotting in general, or this physiological process is a multi-step process, among which blood clotting is a specific step of that, but overall this is a process called hemostasis. Hemo means blood, stasis means stopping. So it's stopping blood loss. So you can see we were not bleeding, but then we got cut. Now we are bleeding, and then the process of hemostasis is going to oppose the damage from the cut so that it puts you back. It clots the cut, heals the cut, heals the wound in your blood vessels. So now you are back not bleeding. That matches the set point. So congratulations, you are back in homeostasis. But for those of you who have maybe just read through chapter 1, your book uses this as a clear example of positive feedback. But I want you to see, when we talk about negative versus positive feedback, as I said, negative doesn't mean bad, positive doesn't just mean good. That negative means negate the stimulus, positive means enhance the stimulus. And so don't think of it as negative versus positive feedback. Think of it as negative feedback is the overarching process. Everything in your body to maintain health deals with negative feedback, utilizes negative feedback. And then positive feedback is sort of a special tool, a special case scenario, a special mechanism that helps your body accomplish negative feedback very quickly. So if we use this example with blood clotting, hopefully everybody agrees that overall hemostasis is a negative feedback process, because we can see we were not bleeding. We had a stimulus that caused us to bleed. Then we had this negative feedback process called hemostasis that opposed the stimulus, that opposed the cut, and put us back in homeostasis. So we are back in our set point. But let's see, why is this also considered a positive feedback process? Because, as I said, in hemostasis, there's a couple different steps of hemostasis. One of the steps of hemostasis is called platelet plug aggregation. So it's called platelet plug aggregation. So platelet plug aggregation. So that is one of the steps of hemostasis. When you look at just this process, platelet plug aggregation, this is a positive feedback mechanism. Why? So here is your blood vessel that then gets cut. And when the blood vessel gets cut, it releases chemicals in the body, and these chemicals attract platelets. When these platelets get attracted to the cut, the platelets release more chemicals. Those chemicals attract more platelets. Those platelets then release more chemicals, which attract more platelets, more chemicals, more platelets, more chemicals, more platelets, and thus you have an exponential increase in this feedback loop. So you can see that when we zoom in very narrowly, the stimulus for the positive feedback mechanism of platelet plug aggregation is the release of these clotting chemicals. Remember, the initial stimulus was the cut for the overall negative feedback process that we are opposing. But when you look specifically at platelet plug aggregation, the stimulus is the release of clotting chemicals. What is the release? What is the result of those clotting chemicals? The attraction of platelets. What happens when those platelets get attracted? They release more chemicals. What happens when you release those chemicals? More platelets. So we see this positive feedback mechanism that we kind of go loop, 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 positive feedback mechanism that ultimately helps you oppose the cut very, very quickly. So you can see that positive feedback, in this case platelet plug aggregation, is a special tool that your body uses to accomplish negative feedback very, very quickly, because obviously blood loss is a big deal and that needs to be fixed very, very quickly. You don't have a lot of positive feedback mechanisms in your body because they are very powerful and they have to be controlled very, very carefully. Because, for instance, you don't want your blood to clot if it doesn't have to, or as soon as the cut is healed, you don't want to continue to clot your blood. You want it to stop immediately. So you don't use positive feedback mechanisms a lot because they have to be controlled very, very carefully. But I always want you to think of positive feedback. While yes, by definition, it enhances the stimulus, it's all within the purpose of negative feedback, of putting you back in homeostasis. Because think about this. What is sickness? Sickness is not being able to keep yourself in homeostasis. And ultimately, that is what death is. If you are out of homeostasis for too long, then death will result. You'll continue to get more sick, you have chronic issues, and eventually that is what death is not being able to maintain those negative feedback systems to keep yourself in those set points, to keep yourself in homeostasis. So just let me know if you have any questions. This is just a brief overview of negative versus positive feedback. So I hope it was helpful. I hope it clarifies some of the things in the book and obviously clarifies if you had any confusion. But please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have any other questions.